When Dmitri, a homeless guy, first saw the wild reindeer, he thought for sure it was going to attack him. However, upon closer inspection, this proved not to be the case. The reindeer begged Dmitri to stay with it since it really needed his assistance. Dmitri was almost brought to tears when he learned of what was happening here. In the beginning, Dmitri had no idea what to do. Even though he still couldn't quite accept what the reindeer had led him to, he could see how this animal might reasonably feel like it desperately needed assistance. He felt helpless. What could a person like him accomplish? Yet he was destitute, having gone without food for 3 days. But if he could go back to the way they came from, maybe he'd run into someone who could help. Despite the odds, that was all he could think of doing. For the first time in a long time, Dmitri had the opportunity to genuinely make a difference, and the reindeer were counting on him to step up to the plate and help them. But the reindeer's predicament is unclear. How come it choose a homeless guy, and could Dmitri really aid the animal if he did? At his lowest ebb, Dmitri withdrew from life and lost all hope. He peered into space in the way that had grown customary to him in recent years. Dmitri thought he'd hit bottom, and if he were being really candid, he wasn't sure how he could turn things around. At this pace, no way. 5 years ago, Dmitri lost his job and things appeared to become worse after that. He had attempted to pick himself up, but now he was living on the streets, cut off from his friends and family. Although it had taken a long time, it now seemed like his luck was changing, and sooner than he had imagined. Dmitri had grown weary of city living. While the evenings were chilly, they were nothing compared to the daily onslaught of animosity he endured. Not only did he run afoul of the law enforcement officers, whose day jobs included removing him and other homeless people from the streets, but he also ran into trouble with the neighbors. Nonetheless, his neighbors were just as cruel, regularly insulting him and tossing garbage at him. Dmitri decided on a course of action. He was leaving permanently. Initially, he hadn't given much thought to what he should do. He had no idea what he would need beyond the essentials. Dmitri gathered his spare change and money from the last several months and went to a nearby convenience shop to buy what he needed. His simplistic strategy was to live like a nomad until he ran out of money and food. He would then resort to improvising. Dmitri watched in silent dread as his little supplies ran out rapidly, despite his best efforts to stock up. When his food supply suddenly vanished after a week, he felt hopeless again. Dmitri realized he had no other option, so he stopped trying to save his food and water. Instead, he planned to make the most of his impending death. It had been almost a week and Dmitri was on the verge of death. His energy and food stores were running low, and he was on the verge of collapse. He had very little time left. Dmitri reached the conclusion that he could go no farther since he saw no route ahead. Dmitri sat down by the side of the path leading into the woods and decided to take a break there. Dmitri was satisfied to sit where he was. He prayed that a good Samaritan would aid him. But after so many years on the streets, he knew better than to get his hopes up. He decided to wait until the right moment instead. When Dmitri awoke, the unexpected arrival was neither a vehicle nor a person. However, it was clearly far bigger than him. The creature was enormous. Dmitri couldn't believe he was looking at a reindeer. Although deer were generally docile, they nonetheless maintained a wary distance from people. Unless there was an assault planned. Dmitri had not planned on dying so soon, but the frazzled man had little he could do. Preparing for a severe blow, he shut his eyes tight. Nothing materialized, however. To Dmitri's surprise, the animal was really coming up to him in a friendly manner. When they were done, the reindeer made a low noise and nudged Dmitri. Dmitri was awestruck by the enormous wild beast. He had never been so close to one. He thought this must be the kind of unfathomable terror that was written about in history books. Still, the deer showed no signs of wanting to hurt him. Dmitri had no idea what the deer wanted from him. He had depleted his water and food supplies quite a distance back. Maybe the animal smelled the stink of his dirty clothing and body and decided to investigate. The deer seemed to have no interest in him all. It occurred to Dmitri that maybe the reindeer would leave him alone if he seemed to be asleep or dead. To his dismay, the animal did not stop nudging him. If the reindeer had successfully pushed him into the center of the road, Dmitri would have preferred to be anywhere else at that very time. Now that the beast had dragged his limp corpse into the center of the road, creating a disturbance, Dmitri was certain he was trapped. There was a queue of cars behind where Dmitri had fallen. Some were attempting to miss the reindeer, while others watched the unfolding drama with concern. Within a little while, a guy stepped out of his car and cautiously strolled over. Before confronting Dmitri, the guy cautiously made his way forward so as not to spook the wild beast. Even though all Dmitri wanted to do was get rid of the reindeer, he was concerned about Dmitri's safety and inquired if he needed any help. The man's assistance was more than he had bargained for, and he quickly came to recognize that. There was a pistol in the man's hand. Dmitri was shaken up by the sight of the gun, which he assumed was loaded, as he moved the animal. No, he didn't want any of the reindeer to die, and definitely not because of him. Things were getting out of hand, and he had to do something about it fast. However, how could a novice divert a huge deer from the path of a moving vehicle? The good news is that Dmitri's job would turn out to be much simpler than he had anticipated. So simple that Dmitri's mere act of standing up was enough to signal the animal's departure. Dmitri initially sprang up alertly, horrified by how near the loaded gun was. However, he suddenly realized something. The reindeer changed positions and started to move. Moreover, the reindeer continued to go back in the direction it had come. It walked away from Dmitri, but then turned and stared at him. From this point on, Dmitri realized he didn't have much of a choice. The reindeer would only keep moving if he did too. Dmitri hurriedly followed the deer into the bushes after seeing that the armed guy was still planning to kill it. Dmitri hadn't eaten in 3 days and hadn't had anything to drink in a long time. His muscles burned and his bones hurt from the long trek, but he was completely awake and attentive. Suddenly, he felt a surge of adrenaline from the events of the last few minutes. He should put his renewed vitality to good use. Dmitri was awake, if utterly befuddled by the event. It was amusing that he appeared to be being directed into a valley. Dmitri realized that, because to his exhaustion he had missed the enormous vegetation a few kilometers ahead only a short time ago. And here was this huge wild monster making way for him to get there. To what end, though, he was still uncertain. Dmitri was baffled by the reindeer's mental capabilities. To his surprise, he found himself following the animal's trail. And nonetheless, he couldn't shake the uneasy sensation that he could be getting himself into more trouble than he could possibly manage. But at this point, there wasn't much he could do but wait and watch what happened. Dmitri was exhausted. The trek seemed to go on forever. Now that his adrenaline levels had returned to normal, he was acutely aware of the sun's increasing intensity and the absence of the breeze that had previously kept him comfortable. Basically, he was so tired that he was about to pass out, but they still hadn't arrived. And then he realized something. He couldn't make out what it was at first because of how overgrown the area was. It seemed to Dmitri that the passage through the bush was clearing up and becoming much less thick. After initially worrying that his weariness had caused him to hallucinate, he realized that his mind was not playing a trick on him and that the scene was real. There was obviously something below ground that cleared the air. Okay, but what might it be? He inched closer slowly. It took him some time to get there because of the weather-induced obstruction of branches and leaves, but he did it. Then he notices what's laying in the muck at his feet. We're looking at 2 little reindeer. Dmitri's approaching them with deliberate steps. They're both in terrible condition. One of the animals has a huge gash in its paw, and its blood is on the winning side. The suffering animal moans. Even though the other one seems to be in somewhat better shape, he, too, is moaning in pain. Before he became homeless, Dmitri worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital. There, he helped a lot of humans but no animals. Yet, he does all he can to aid the situation. He zeroes in on the one sleigh full of reindeer that seems the most distressed. There seems to be a shard of lead embedded in the wound on its paw. It very well may be lead from a hunting bullet. Perhaps it was the same guy who brandished a pistol at him only a few minutes before. He carefully uses water from a puddle to wash the wound. He stops the bleeding by pressing some leaves against the cut. He then carefully hoists the animal to the street. He bolts back to the pen where the other reindeer are lying. As well, he moves it to the shoulder of the road. When he arrives, his first priority is to pull over the very first automobile he sees. That's proving to be quite the challenge. A total of 6 vehicles had passed before the 7th one stops. A lady of around middle age exits and sprints over to meet up with Dmitri. "What's going on?" she inquires. "They may have shot these reindeer, but I doubt it." Dmitri said, "Could you please transport these animals to the veterinarian as quickly as possible?" There is no hesitation on the woman's part, and she quickly assists Dmitri in loading the animals into the trunk. They're a close match, but just barely. Dmitri hops in the passenger seat, and they accelerate to the closest animal hospital. They go there and get there after about 20 minutes. Inside, they help each other hoist a reindeer. They notify the first available human that aid is needed for the animal. One hears this, and a doctor rushes to the couple's aid. After urgently urging them to come with me, the doctor leads them into an operating room. The animals are then placed on a table with great care. After hearing their concerns, the vet assures Dmitri and the lady that he will handle the situation from here on out. In appreciation, he informs the couple that they may wait in the hall and that he would keep them updated on the procedure's progress. During his wait, Dmitry can't stop thinking about the armed guy he saw earlier. I'm very sure he's the one who shot these two adorable animals. Dmitry thinks he has to do something about it. As a result, he's decided to file charges. They get a call from him to the local authorities. Dmitry is quite honest with the policeman. The officer guarantees they will act immediately. Apparently, it is against the law to hunt wild animals. The perpetrator of this crime deserves severe punishment. 2 police vehicles arrive at the location of the incident to conduct their investigation. They come upon several spent shells quite quickly. They'll eventually be able to pair this with a firearm. And it turns out, Dmitry witnesses a man suspected of wildlife poaching being arrested after a surprise home invasion, leading to his court conviction and a 3-month jail sentence, during which all his firearms are confiscated. Present in court, Dmitry and Jenna find relief in the verdict, while Dmitry seizes an opportunity to join a group dedicated to rescuing abused animals. 2 months later, Dmitry reconnects with an animal clinic, revisiting the rescue of 2 puppies and witnessing a heartfelt reunion between a reindeer mother and her offspring, cementing his commitment to a morally fulfilling career in animal care.